Everyone, hope you had a good break and had a chance to catch up with everyone. What a fascinating discussion that was, wasn't it?
Yes.
I love sports marketing. So we have an equally exciting presentation coming up. We have Ricardo from PepsiCo. Pepsi has been, as you know, a huge influence on MASB from its earliest days. And now with this presentation, there's a long history of participation. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Ricardo and he will explain his presentation.
Thank you. So great to see everybody. So I want to talk a little bit about disrupting market execution through Granular. And I have a question for all of you. Can it do that? And it truly disrupt the market on super granular as opposed to aggregated and strategic. I'm talking about store level, transaction level analysis. And by working at that level, disrupting. And if you do it, I really gain a competitive edge. And actually, if you do it well, can you achieve escape velocity and don't let your competitors? My name is Ricardo Cuellar. I'm a global director of Perfect Store Insights with PepsiCo, and I'm here to answer that. I'll give you a resounding yes. I think it's doable. I think you can disrupt the market, and if you do it well enough, outsmart your competitors, and actually achieve scale. Now, what I want to share with you today is what setup do you need to get that going? What do you do once you have that setup? Who do you need to bring along in this journey to have an impact in results? And then what do you do once you have arrived to this destination? So let's talk about the setup. These are beautiful and lovely data. Right? We have to build. What I'm talking about is putting in a central data repository your sales at the most granular level, transaction, SKU by visit. Don't aggregate, please. It's an offense to the work that we do. And then you start collecting all the attractions that happen around the store. We call them points of interest. There's different names for them. Either a school, a college, park, a church, what's happening around the store. And today we're in a beautiful time where you can access that data easily with Google Maps for companies that sell it to you, and you put it on the table. And then you can also get traffic information. Like we all have our pings from our cell phones, so now we can acquire a lot of information on where people moving from to big roads, small roads, walking, etc. You get the data and you put it in data. You make sure that you try to capture the store characteristics, their size, how many entries they have, are they on the corner of the store, how many points of interruption you have in the store. Any characteristics that define the store, you can get your hands on it to bring it to the data. Demographics, income, age, race, gender, all the variables that we can get today and widely available for many markets globally. You want that information in your data. And if you're lucky enough, you might get some execution KPIs. So imagine, I don't know, a robot taking pictures of your shelves and sending that information every hour, every day, whatever frequency you can. If you have that type of information, you bring it into the data. But then the beauty is you gotta get these databases to talk to each other. That's when the magic happens, right? When you have the geolocation information, latitude, longitude, and you can start connecting with the information. You also probably need cross-reference tables, harmonization tables that are named by different folks. And when you get it, all the elements of the data talking to each other, that's when the magic starts. So you have your data lake, but what do you do, right? Right? You unleash the hell out of data science. I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but you throw the whole army at it, the best one that you have. Benki was insisting that I mention some of the models, so we use k-means clustering, quantum regression forest, cat boost. I think those are the probably standard nowadays, but whatever great data science you have, you bring it to the table. Now, what do we focus that data science? You can go in a million directions, right? So we focus a lot on segmentation, right? It's trying to understand that context around the store and bringing that shopper and consumer alive through segmentation. That's probably our biggest effort and work leveraging this data. We focus on prioritization as well. Not all stores sell the same and have the same potential of growth. So how do you pick your winning store, the one that you should deploy all your toys, your elements, point of sale, materials, discounts, etc., and prioritize them and run them for different activities that you can. We chase white space. A lot of you know in Texas, for example, Pepsi is not the leading brand, and it's sometimes not the number two. How do we find those restaurants where we're not today and that we can chase and try to? So we pursue white space with this information. And finally, optimization, basically of the plan of the offering that we have in the store. How do we get the right number of facings and the right portfolio in everything? Those are some of our main focus of data science when we apply it to the data lake. So you build your data lake, you have mastered data science and are finding phenomenal business intelligence that can help you win. But you have to bring the right folks along in the conversation to put data information into execution, right? I'm talking about the usual suspects that we see in our industry, so the go-to-market team, sales, commercial leadership, category management, in-store execution, right? If you don't bring those folks along and share with them what you found and convince them that by executing differently, by disrupting the market with different execution, you can win the market, then you're not going to get great execution. You have to bring the right stakeholders into the conversation to get things done. So we'll talk about the data lake, data science. Who do you bring along? We dream about the segment of one. If you hear our CEO speak, Ramon, he would love for us to treat each store differently. And we are millions of years away from it, apologies, but we're working in that direction and aiming for that segment of one and really differentiating how we treat and deploy portfolio in each store. And then, honestly, we believe that if you make that happen, you're going to get thrilled consumers, you're going to get storekeepers that are super happy, you're going to get a more efficient operation, so better for our bottom line or to reinvest, and hopefully result in gaining share, and thus, getting the competitive advantage for competition. But do you stop there, right? And of course, the answer is no, right? You continue to chase more granular data. I'm talking about the image recognition, the robots, whatever tool you have, the sales force taking pictures of yourself, and our storekeeper sending it to you, on real time, and you adjust your orders based on that. Tracking traffic inside of the store, not anymore outside, but what's happening in the store. We're talking today about temperature data, all the digital data, any additional data source that can give you an advantage, you bring into the data lake. And of course, you continue to harness best-in-class data science, whatever comes next, machine learning, AI, more advanced models, you continue to iterate on that. And that's how you achieve scale velocity. And even if your competitors jump into this capability, you're going to be moving faster than them, and they will never catch up. Any additional tips for success on top of what we discussed? I call this the Ricardo special. Like it. The traditional approach on these projects, and even on digital transformation projects, is you have kind of data and IT sitting on the table. You have, of course, data science, and you have the business. You have the three of them interact, right? Now, my problem with this approach is this. Data and IT, if you have them lead the project, you're going to focus on the fancy architectures, Snowflake, Databricks, all the piping. Will the results of the analysis be valuable for business and accurate? No offense to if anybody here from the IT or data teams, but I've seen failure and challenges in that approach. You have data science, right? You're going to get the fanciest models, the most advanced models, the best fit, but will those models be relevant and meaningful for the business? And I've seen cases where they're not. They're super good academic models, if you will. No offense, but they don't answer the question. They don't pass the test of business. And the business folks, They don't have time. And they shouldn't have. Business folks should be selling, making, moving things. They shouldn't be spending a lot of time dealing with data, dealing with models. That's not how they move the P&L. So how do we solve for that? And my humble suggestion is you bring a business champion. And I pick those two words with a lot of care. Business means that person needs to be very close from the business, ideally even come from the business, so they know and they live P&Ls and sales and challenges and brand and all of that. And he has to champion the needs of the business. And then that person interacts with the business who doesn't have time, understand the requirements, and then documents them, leads with checking that the data is good. So removing all the stuff that is low value added for the business. And then that person not only interacts with data and data science, but guides the work of those two teams to ensure that the output is meaningful. So I always think that if you engage with that business champion and bring it into the equation, you get outstanding results. They're called value realization teams, business engagement teams, consultants. They have different names for the problem. So in summary, we've talked about data lake, applying data science for segmentation, prioritization, white space, and optimization. We talk about bringing the folks that make execution happen to the conversation. We talk about chasing on continuously better data, continue chasing better models as well. And we're talking about bringing a business champion into the equation to ensure that the output of the analysis will yield the results needed. And again, I think that if you do that, you can outsmart your competitors, disrupt the market, and achieve scale. Are there any questions?
I just really want to say what an outstanding presentation that was. What was interesting when I was CMO of Honeywell, I was that business champion figure who looked both ways, right? And I do think that it takes someone that can have that perspective, can be Janice in that situation, right? Because the average data scientist doesn't have the business acumen to make it work. And the average business guy doesn't have enough data science acumen to know what the hell's going on, what's possible. And so there's this impasse unless you have that person. And I think, obviously causal AI, all that kind of stuff only makes that more true, not less true, right? And so I just, that slide, I mean, it was all good, but that slide right there, I think, is almost like the lodestone on everything that goes forward.
And it's a role that is not always appreciated. I've heard the expression paper carrier.
Yeah.
So I've heard the negative, hey, or eliminate that box and you don't really need it, right? But then I also heard leaders in our industry that say, listen, it's the only way to really have business-centric projects. So I'm very happy that you.
How do you feel about the trend that's clearly building away from data lakes into federated data structures with a common governance over the top of them? Would there be any part of this that would change in your mind?
So PepsiCo has been a federation of markets historically. We've never been, and I'm going to mention our competitor Coke as strong as Coke in having a central command and control operation. We've always had markets that do whatever they want, and we've had a thin global organization, and we've been working hard the last 10 years to build that global acumen. So we're going in the direction of centralized, not federated, standardized, and having central global teams building it. And I believe on it. I'll be honest with you. I've seen enough of that federated approach, and then you have markets doing the same thing, or they deviate very quickly from, and then this market is not learning from the other. So I'll be honest with you. I believe on that global central approach, maybe with a little leeway to localize certain things. But I'm big fan right now of globalization.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'm just wondering, I mean, in terms of the strategic questions that you found you've best been able to answer with this approach, what are they? I mean, is it where to invest, what specific segment to target? I mean, what are the?
Yeah, I'll group it in. I'm gonna group it in two strategic and then one tactical. Strategic number one is what we call go-to-market. Is how do you want to service those stores? And you start getting there into questions. How many do you send? How many times do you send the sales rep or the truck to visit that store? What caliber or sales rep do you send to that store? How much discounts do you give to that store? Do you give them more credit, less credit, no credit, right? Do you deploy promotions on the stores or not? And calibrating that go-to-market equation and optimizing and continue to iterate this type of data, especially the prioritization data, is super valuable. That super strategy has direct impact on cost to serve, so it hits the P&L. It has direct impact on sales uplift if you do it right. So that's one big pocket for us. And then the other is what we call picture of success, which is the assortment that you bring to the store, the points of interruption, the assets, the brands, SKUs that you bring to the store. If you do your segmentation right, you should be able to fine-tune very well and be more relevant to the shoppers around that store. So those are the two strategic biggest planks. And then a tactical one, other than the white space is also strategic, hunting for stores that you're not operating or restaurants. And then we also use it when you are deploying a campaign in the market, whether it's through social media, personalized, right? Or with physical point of sale materials, knowing where to deploy that and where we have a biggest chance of success is also a big use case for us. It's less impactful because you're gonna only touch certain percent of the pie.
So Pepsi just made a very big acquisition of Poppi, we talked about outside coffee. Were you able to use any lessons learned from these analyses for other products as Pepsi evaluated how much to pay for Poppi and how to?
So I'm not that close to that M&A team. I wish. If I were, you would see me arriving in a fancy BMW here. But I would say, like, I think this analysis honestly is granular, it's tactical. I've been at this for a year and a half. I spent my career mainly in revenue growth management, so price elasticity and all that, which to me is more like a carpet bombing, right? Okay, I'm gonna increase my price from $3.99 to $4.29, whatever it is, and you do it across the market, and your P&L feels it immediately for good or for bad. You can price yourself out of the market as we did in the last year or so. But it's big and massive, right? This one is surgical. You go there with the scalpel. So I wouldn't see this analysis in the acquisition part. What I hope is that we use it to grow the distribution of those brands and really understand, okay, where do they have the highest chance of success and make a big effort to make it. So from a planogram and assortment, I hope it's.
Well, I'd love to know from you how you are taking into account the share of the market that is not available for you to sell to. It's a common thing I've seen in working with companies, including the CPG, is that they're assuming that the total category buyer population is available to sell to. But that's often never the case. How do you account for that in the way that you pull the data in all different sources?
I'm not sure that I follow that sell-through element of your question.
So what I'm saying, let's use the USA. You have 200 million buyers that are here, but what you're selling isn't necessarily has a population base of 200 million that you can sell to, either because you're selling a value proposition or at a price point that is not relevant or unaffordable. So how do you take into account the actual maximum population versus the total category buying population that applies to your brands? How do you build that
So
in?
it's a tricky one, but what comes to mind is panel data, right? That's when you can get a sample of the population, understand how much penetration do you have and what is the gap there. And I think the beauty of the US, which, so I've worked in 4 continents. I started my career with Pepsi US and fell in love with the data of the market and with the country itself. But I work in the Middle East, and I work with Asia, and I work with Latin America. And the panel that you have in the Krogers of the world with the frequent shopper card data, where you get the personalized behavior, shopping behavior, actual behavior of millions of people, is a beauty, right? So I don't think you will get ever to the true 200 million behavior, but
you're not
I would
making
use,
you're
I
not
would
making
join
the
the
mistake of
data
everybody.
lake,
Yeah,
the panel data, and use it for my mom. And that would give you a little bit of sense of that penetration. And then what can you do to bring people into the category?
In B2B, we think of this as people who mistake TAM, right, for their ICP.
but in B2C, it's the same thing, right? Anybody who buys bread is a customer of our bread product. No.
Right.
Anybody who goes and buys cola is a customer of PepsiCo. Well, not exactly.
But the percentages in B2C are higher.
Yes.
Source data for the darker channels like cash and carries and wholesale networks and in the traditional trade in cash economies.
So sorry, but what is the question again?
Have you sourced data that uncovers this
Yeah.
sort of thing? And how have you done that?
Yeah, so I right now I'm not working in the US, so I'm forced to work with all the other markets.
Mhm.
And traditional trade is a massive channel for us. And what we do is we use for sales, we use our internal sales, so we don't have visibility a lot into the competition. But then we get all the other elements of the data lake, and it's powerful enough that you can do a lot with it. So
You have to send in data into the wholesale industry business.
Yeah.
You don't know the setup price, you don't know the white split. You have any
And-
ideas on how we can get that?
and we have partnered with some distributors that they will share data with us as well. So we've tried to get as much data and as far as closer to the shopper as possible. But you can build this with basic data, with relatively basic data and still get a lot of power from them.
Is transnational trade an issue for you? Do you
No.
also say trade either?
No, this is honestly, we do it at the market level.
It was at the outsmart stage, there, the last stage. So you must have you effectively model competitors.
I mean, if you have the data, yes, but it's really like when you go at store level, it's not that easy to get competitor data.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get it, Canadian, sometimes Nielsen will give it to you, but it's not, or the retailer, you buy the data straight and sometimes they sell you, this volume for competition. So if we have it, for sure, and you can deploy this model to optimize share of market and all that, but it's not that complex. I wish we got more competitive data. That would be any element that we add to the data lake, you see me happy and smiling, excited. Yeah.
I have a question. On the going down to a segment of one, that type of logic, how is a household that has multiple influencers, like for example, who is different from the shopper? How do you think about that when you have the situation? Especially, I'm thinking I spent a good deal of time working with FritoLay in the past, and often majority for the brands that I was working with, it actually was a situation where the purchaser is not the end user, and there's some kind of interaction going on there. And I was wondering what the thinking is around that now.
Yeah, so number one, I remind myself often that we're trying to simplify millions of super complex decisions that we all take every day into a few variables. So you're never going to get a lot of the information you would like to have to optimize. Right? The other thing that I would say is I've done shopper research myself, trying to understand shopper behavior and consumption behavior, and where do they are one and the same, how do they deviate? So I would use primary research or panel data, other elements. But you always because this is store level, you're always limited by the coverage of that information.
Yeah.
So I think we've gone deep enough there to try to capture those nuances. But if we can triangulate between the insight that we get here and maybe a couple of studies that talk about shopping versus consumption and how that interacts, we would use that as part of it.
You made a comment towards the beginning of your presentation about academic models, right? I think you and I probably have a similar view here, but how do you think about the trade-off, right? Because it's not that you are intentionally seeking to shed accuracy, right, or precision, but we are talking about a probabilistic universe, right? And 95% is sort of an arbitrary number, right? So, I mean, how are you thinking about it in terms of a trade-off that you are operationally willing to make between accuracy and speed?
I'll give you an example, and this is from a couple of weeks back. So we're doing a project for Gatorade Brazil, and my loved data scientists use year ago sales to predict potential of the stores. Now, a very common and savvy practice when you're doing forecasting, I think we use the lag of sales back in the day to forecast, right? But if you want to explain drivers of sales to the business, how do you explain sales with sales? Like they will tell you, say, oh, so I don't need a data scientist to figure out that if I sold a lot a year ago, then that store is relevant, right? So I had to, and it took me a couple of minutes to convince my data scientist, listen, I hear you, I know, and yes, you elevated the fit of the model, but I don't want to be the one standing in front of the business to explain sales with sales as a driver of sales. So do me a favor, remove it.
Because it's not.
Let's see what the model does.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens with the other variables. Maybe explore a couple more variables. And then if the fit of the model is horrendous, okay, maybe we present both or we stick to the one and I'll find a way to pitch it to the model, explain why we kept it there. But if possible, I don't want to explain sales with sales as a driver. So that, I will make trade-offs always to try to be able to explain myself to the business, unless it really trashes the accuracy and say, listen, you gotta use your information from a as a good predictor. And yeah, I'm explaining sales with sales, but that's the best that we can do with the data.
Great answer. Thanks.
So how do you measure the success of what you do?
We do post-implementation analysis on all forms of sizes. So go to market, we will measure if we truly reduce the cost to serve with the adjustments that we did to the store visits. Sometimes we forecast and say, okay, we think that the stores that we're going to double the visits, they should grow by 10%. And we measure them for the next 3 months. Yeah, that came lower or higher. So we do a lot of post-event. And the power of this, so PepsiCo did something that I hadn't seen it done. We truly built over the last 5 years a global data science organization. So we have today the manpower and the intellect to measure those things and report it back. And because the data is sitting in the data lakes now and is easily accessible, and you can actually run queries real quickly and run models, we can answer those questions with relative.
Are you able to look at the marginal, sort of like standing on her shoulders here, the marginal benefit of data science to better and better decision making by the business?
That's not $1 million question, right? That's when it gets tricky. We have to build a business case to pitch for those resources and for this capability, right? And I'm sure there's some bit of funky math going there and trying to pinpoint. But basically, I'll give you a few numbers. We assume that deploying something like this should give you around a 1% incremental revenue. We've seen stores where we deploy what we call perfect store can sell between 10 to 20% more than a non-perfect store.
How much more?
10 to 20.
That's a really bad return.
So we're happy with it. I've seen stores where we pick the right stores to deploy physical campaigns with point of sale. Think about Super Bowl, right? And you want to execute in the store for a nice display. If we pick the right stores, they will sell around 10% more than the stores that we should have not picked.
So just to clarify, and this is in your more mature product categories. This is not like emergent new product launches.
Yeah, this, I mean.
In mature product
you start
categories,
to-
you're getting,
You start to travel to get ROI when you start to work only with the smaller niche or innovation.
Because actually what you're seeking to do, right, is trigger the law of compounding in the business, right? By making it possible for the business to make better and better and better
Yeah.
and better decisions, right? So then reverse engineering the analytics off of that to look at what you're doing that contributes to that.
That's why I think that you can truly disrupt the market and achieve a competitive advantage, and scalability is. Now, again, Coke is a super respectful competitor, so I don't think we will outsmart. But smaller competitors that don't have that capability, they will not know what's hitting. They will not know why they're losing share and why it's happening here but not here, but here more. It's been very hard for them to track what we're doing. So it's a really powerful.
I had a question for you. So a lot of the presentation here is focused on the data science piece. Where is the reporting capabilities for the business based on that same set of data? I'm finding that 80 to 90% of the requests are just around that core business, and the data science and forecasting is kind of like that last mile. So within this ecosystem here, you have standard KPIs and business reporting that they use to monitor the business on.
I think the reason why it's not there is because I'm not responsible for it probably, and my team is not. So that goes to the markets.
Is it on the same set? Is it on the same set?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's the same data lake, if you will.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fit with me. So maybe I'm not putting enough emphasis on that. But I fully agree that closed loop has to happen on one time.
And that's the most important piece. That's the hardest piece, because once you have that, you can do any analytics on it that you want.
Yeah, I think Sovenki was working in projects with me when I joined Pepsi a while back. And, he was dealing with the data challenges at that time. And again, the US, we've always had much better than anywhere else. But what we've done, I think, very strongly in the last years is invest on that centralized IT data lake harmonized capability, which was not our case because we were a federational market, so everybody was doing their own thing. And I think we haven't completed the journey yet, but I think we're getting to that point where you're starting to see a lot of return. And I think it'll make us a formidable competitor in years to come.
That'll make it easier for the AI engines to run too,
Yeah.
because you have different definitions and variances. It's gonna
And
cause
we're
AI to lose.
harmonizing, even trying it. How do you call things on different markets? How do you put the same name to that variable?
Yeah.
So the code that you write once, you can run it in any market in days. And
Ricardo, I had a slight build of the same thing. So AI not so much in running the models, but in synthesizing and democratizing the insights. So very often now people resort to a Copilot or a ChatGPT engine to make sure that more of those business people can access. Otherwise, we are restricting to people who know how to look at that dashboard and see what the heck does it mean. So how do you actually enable somebody to ask questions in English and understand what the responses are? So your business champions idea, beautiful, but they are unicorns. There aren't too many of them that you can actually leverage. And is there some way you can use the emerging AI technologies to replace that?
And so I think there's a couple of dynamics that we're exploring, right? One, there's some folks that think that you can automate a lot, right? And actually have like a category match, like somebody who's in the insights community, actually go to a nice UI UX tool, click a few buttons, and then you run these complex segmentations. And if you design it well, it communicates them in a very easy way to digest and understand. And then you run with it to the Walmarts or Kroger's of the world and pitch it and do the whole thing. My boss doesn't like that approach. And he thinks that, especially, a lot of these things are iterative. You get the first output of the model, and sales used to predict sales. Okay, that's not great. What about this variable? Add this, remove this, and you iterate a few times. So if you believe in that, then it's still human. But what we are doing right now is trying to develop for example, in segmentation, a global standard segmentation. And so if I call a segment urban, no kids, middle income on the go, right? We want to identify that segment across all markets the same way and call it the same way and have a playbook for how to win in that segment globally. If you do it, then you can automate it and have a agent AI or whatever it is actually guide you in that, because it's now a standard way to look at it, and you don't require a million people. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.